I don't want you to grab for your phone. I want you to check your watch. And that's why I need to make sure that the watch I've designed and that you have on your wrist is doing his job in the most efficient possible way. A knife that doesn't cut well is not a good knife, even if it's beautiful, even if it's nice in your kitchen, even if your kitchen looks better with that knife in it. It's not a good knife if it doesn't cut well.
Ressence is an elite watchmaker that refuses to do things the traditional way. As the brand celebrates its 15th anniversary, we're joined by founder and CEO Benoît to discuss a decade and a half of challenging the status quo. Benoît, thank you for taking the time to chat with Man of Many.
Thank you. That sounds a lot. Decade and a half.
Well, I mean, you've achieved a huge amount in that time. Yeah. In that 15 years, well, I guess, can we start with what inspired you to create the brand to begin with?
It comes from a frustration that I walked around at one of these huge trade shows, these watch trade shows in Switzerland, and I thought, how is it possible that these enormous companies that you see, all the brands that we all know, that are there since so many years, with so many points of sales, so many productions, so many employees, how is it possible that they are still selling products that were designed 50, 60, 70 years ago? As a designer, you cannot understand that. Now I understand why, but at that time, I couldn't get around it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to design a watch for myself. Basically, that's how it started.
As you alluded to right there, many watch brands feel compelled to kind of pay a constant tribute to their own heritage and tradition and that kind of thing, which does, to a certain extent, box them into doing things a particular way. Ressence doesn't have any of that. What does that free you to do?
Well, it's not that it frees us to do things. It's more that our background is very different, and because of that, we think very differently, and we approach the watch, the mechanical watch, in a very different way. And this is more the logics behind it. It's not like I perfectly understand watch brands that have a certain heritage and that have a certain way of looking at watchmaking. It's logical very often. It makes a lot of sense to them. But to us, it doesn't make sense. It's not natural for us to think like that. We think differently. We think like industrial designers would think. And that is different than a watchmaker. And so obviously the result can only be very different.
And so one of those major points of difference for you is the ROCS system that you developed. Yep. That, for those unfamiliar, is the Ressence Orbital Convex system. If you could just give us a brief explanation of what that's all about.
That's the system that displays the time on a Ressence. So normal watches mechanical watches have a dial and hands that turn around on top of the dial and to show the time. And Ressence, we have another way to do it. So we have a set of discs, a combination of set of discs that are all coplanar, and they obviously rotate around each other. Otherwise, they would not be able to turn. And that's the way a Ressence show the time. So there are hands to show the time on the Ressence, but they are graphical hands, between brackets, printed on the discs. And so the graphical result of that is that you have a one surface indication of time instead of having different layers, because hands are in different layers on top of another layer being the dial. And there are some ergonomical reasons that we do that.
One of the other points of difference of Ressence is, while some brands will try and showcase the complexity of their watches, you go the complete other way and kind of create this seamless effect where, while they are definitely these incredibly complex creations, you almost mask that from the user, and it is purely about the experience. Why was that important to you?
That's a logical thing for a designer to do, and a lot less logical to do for a watchmaker. I explained that. When you're a watchmaker, the beauty of your craft lays exactly in the fact that you are able to solve or develop or create a very impressive, technically complicated mechanism. And that's the why of your brand very often. That's why you do this. And so the whole idea for us is really more to focus on the functionality, the final functionality of a watch. We try to reduce or take away or hide everything that is not adding or helping you to read the time in the most efficient possible way. That means that we hide the technicity. It's there, I can tell you, it's very complex, but we hide it because when you read the time, when you're rushing to your train station or whatever, you just want to know the time. And I don't want you to grab for your phone. I want you to check your watch. And that's why I need to make sure that the watch I've designed and that you have on your wrist is doing his job in the most efficient possible way.
And that kind of ties in with something you've talked about before, which is the relationship between the wearer and the watch. Having worn this beautiful Type 1 night blue all day today, which I'm going to find very difficult to give back, I can speak to how that relationship might feel, even briefly. It's an extraordinary thing. Why is that relationship important to you? And you've also had not to make the question too long, but you've also have a natural kind of element to it where it feels more like a pebble than a traditional watch, which is something you've alluded to before.
We relate to products as humans in a very similar way as we relate to humans or animals. So our brain was not formed to have a certain way, different way, or a separate algorithm or whatever to interact with products. And so we interact with products like we would interact with any other human being. It's a bit weird to say that, but think about it. You'll notice that people have, for example, a relationship with their car, or they have a strong relationship with maybe their phones. Many people, their smartphones are becoming excessively, I believe, present in the lives of people. But in the end, why is it like that? It's because the relationship has been designed with these products. Why do we have such a good relationship with our smartphones? Well, because the people that designed them, they think about that. And they made sure that our relationship was good because you will use it again and again and again. And that's the idea. Why do you make a product? Not it's to use it. So the relationship will generate a stronger bond with you and the watch, or with you and the product. And I believe that as an industrial designer, you have to consider that as a central element in your design process. And so when you refer to, for example, the organicness of our watches, yes, it increases the price a lot. I would say, would we make flat watches? They would maybe cost half of it, because going from 2D, what all watches are, to real 3D, what a Ressence is, well, it means you're not only going from 2D to 3D, you have other machines that are like 3 times more expensive. You have not only the machines, but the people that run the machines, the all engineering behind it, the precision that you have a third dimension you have to manage. You have other types of watchmakers, etc., etc. So the whole thing changes. So why do you do it then? Why do you make your watches organic? Because they could have been cheaper to make when they would be flat. Well, it's again for the relationship. We're cavemen still in our brains. Some people think they're not anymore, but
I know I am.
You are a caveman. Well, no,
most certainly.
I'm also a caveman. Anyway, the idea here is to say that our natural tendency is that we would feel more attracted to organic shapes than to geometrical shapes. And that is why a Ressence watch has an organic shape. It's just the relationship is just better.
I feel like it would be fair to describe Ressence and the incredible designs that you've come up with as a future facing brand. I don't know how you would feel about that. But as you move from one project to another, and you're kind of heading in that direction, what's your North Star?
Yeah, the North Star is for us still, and I think it will always be, otherwise I believe we lose a little bit of who we are, is the idea that good design, the principles of good design are always applied to our products, certainly to the core collection. Can be that sometimes we do collaborations with artists. Okay, then you can move away a little bit from that principle. But the whole idea is really to apply the principles of good design, or at least thinking of industrial design, to fine watchmaking. And that's my North Star. I will always follow that principle.
This feels like a fitting time to introduce the book that you've just launched ahead of time.
Yes.
Do you feel that Ressence is ahead of time?
We are certainly a contemporary brand. I sometimes give the example, imagine yourself there's no watchmaking. What would a watch look like today if you would design it from scratch? And there would be no biased thing from the past. And I always hope it will look like a Ressence.
Right.
Okay, you will never know. Nobody will ever know. But the idea behind the brand, the logics that we follow, the vision that we have, the design culture that we apply, is all going in that direction. Maybe not ahead of time, but certainly contemporary. If something is ahead of time in what we do, is the idea that we make watches that will stay relevant in time. That I believe is something important. And how can you be relevant as a product? You can only, in my opinion again, you can only be relevant as a product if the function that you execute is done properly. A product has no sense, it has no meaning, has no reason of existence if it doesn't do its function in a proper way. A knife that doesn't cut well is not a good knife, even if it's beautiful, even if it's nice in your kitchen, even if your kitchen looks better with that knife in it. It's not a better knife. It's not a good knife if it doesn't cut well. And that means that you have to think about your products for the future. Let's not forget, we are considered fine watchmaking. We are a fine watchmaking brand. What is one of the definitions that you could give to fine watchmaking is that we make products, and certainly real luxury products. They should be, in my opinion, things that are designed to use a long time. When we design our watches, we think always like this way of doing this should be okay for 25 years. Who's doing that? No, there's no industry that's thinking like that anymore, except the music industry. I'm talking instruments. So the logics that we apply is really to say the designs that we have, we always think, okay, will this be relevant in number of years from now? Will we see this as a good design? Maybe you will see, okay, it's not exactly from now, it's maybe a little from sometimes in the past, but it's still relevant, it's still, the proportions are good, it still does its job well, etc.
Right.
That's maybe the ahead of time part of it.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm a bit long in my answers.
No, that was great. Ahead of time, the book comprises conversations with leaders from a range of industries. Yep. Which include, creativity, technology, and also just kind of people. How did that come about? What was the inspiration for that book?
Actually, it's someone in our office that came with the idea, Simon. And we had the idea driving back from Watches and Wonders in 24. It's a long drive, It's 8 hours in the car together.
8 hours is nothing in Australia.
I know. In Europe, you're on the other side. Well, in Europe, you're on the other side of Europe. So it was a nice conversation. So he came up with the idea we should do a journal, if I remember well. And by brainstorming in the car, Simon is also a designer, so We like to brainstorm. And so finally we came to the idea, let's do a book. Let's do a book about, because it was his idea to do a book about the future. And so, yes, it was I think, a very good way to illustrate who the people that are attracted to the brand, who they are and how they think. Because in the end, a Ressence is also a little bit a cerebral, is that English, exercise. And it means you need to be open-minded. You need to be curious, at least to discover new possibilities. Watchmaking is very often a repetition of the same thing. And when you enter a world like that and you come with something completely different, willing to accept the fact that status quo can be challenged and is challengeable, and not for the sake of challenging it, but really to say, okay, we are now 150 years later. Can't we do something more in 150 years than everything we have done so far? But something more in a sense of really changing the architecture of a watch, or the system architecture of the watch. Can't we do something else? So that's the basis.
As we mentioned multiple times, you're celebrating the 15th anniversary of Ressence. When you look back on that time, did you imagine that you'd wind up where you are? Did you kind of have that level of ambition, or were you kind of flying by the seat of your pants and just seeing how it went?
No, I'm not like that. I'm not someone that jumps in the dark. It's not my type. But still, yes, you go into a direction, you feel that there is something missing in that field that you can. Is that something you believe is missing, or is it something everyone thinks is missing? That's the question you cannot answer before you did it. And so it was more like this, because, before I did Ressence, I worked 12 years as an industrial design consultant. So I was in that environment of industrial design for so many years, and then you see the markets that are saturated with it, and then the markets that are absolutely not saturated with that vision. And certainly fine watchmaking wasn't. When designers apply their skills on watchmaking, it's very often on the outside. It's just the shell. They redesign the case, maybe the dial, maybe the hands. It stops very quickly to maybe the elements that you see. It never goes deeper. At least I don't have many examples. I cannot number a lot of examples where industrial designers went further than that. And this is what really attracted me with watches, is that I could really go in depth in the watch and change the whole system, the whole architecture of the watch. There are not so many industries where you can just do that.
It feels like the kind of thing that only an outsider could really do. Ressence is a brand that's built on innovation. From the ROCS to there have been numerous other things you've introduced. One that I find particularly fascinating is the Type 3 with the oil field design. Can you explain how that came about?
As a kid, we used to sail. My father and my parents basically rented a sailing boat in the summer times in the Mediterranean Sea. And very often there was a night shift to do because we had to go from one point to the other, and there was no stop. It was middle of the sea, so we had to sail, let's say, for 24 hours. And as I was the oldest kid in the family, it was my job to do the night shift. And back in the 80s, because I'm that old, there was no GPS on boats. And middle of the sea, you have no reference points anymore. There's no land, so you see this pitch dark in the middle of the sea at night. So your only reference point was your compass, and it was an oil-filled compass always. And and because it's the only thing you see, they are like in submarines, they're red, they're illuminated red at night, not to blind you. But it's still, something that's burned in your retina to see that glass ball with an object inside that turns. You know it's inside, you know it doesn't touch the glass, but still you see it on the outside of the glass. And so I think it must come from there. I don't see where it could come from otherwise. The idea of filling a watch with oil. And of course,
You alluded to how there's almost like a screen effect to the watches, and it really enhances that. It creates this... It's a fascinating thing to look at because it doesn't look like it should work. It doesn't look like it can be real. It's an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, it enhances something I really like is the dematerialization of the watch. And actually it's exactly the opposite as most watchmakers would do. They would materialize the watch. And seen from their perspective, it's a very logical thing to do. But when you look at it from a designer perspective, the dematerialization is a very interesting concept because you start to concentrate on the function and not on the support. By adding the oil, you really hide all the physical aspect. You hide the physical aspect of the components doing the job, and you end up with a kind of screen. But if the parts are dark enough, you will not see them, and so it gives an impression that it's kind of one thing, one volume, without any reference points on where it starts or where it ends. It's just one thing. Is the fact that the refraction is gone between the glass and the dial, and so it really feels as if the glass has become the screen. It's a when you see it for the first time, it's hard for your brain to understand exactly what it's looking at. It feels like, as you say, a screen. It feels like something that's animated rather than. It feels like it should be pixels rather than mechanical pieces that are moving around. Speaking of the Type 3, by the time our discussion's released, you'll have launched a new model that was developed in collaboration with Australia's own Marc Newson. Yes.
How did that come about?
Very naturally.
Yeah.
So it is a retailer in Hong Kong we work with that had the contact details of Marc. So she gave me his contact details. Marc knew Ressence. He also liked it. And so it was a very, very natural collaboration. I sometimes say that Marc and I made a baby together because the watch has really the genes, the DNA of both. And the result is stunning, I believe. It's a really, really nice watch. I really see in the result he's really a good designer also. And yes, so for me it was very fluid. The whole project went really, really fluid. I did his job for 12 years. I know how he thinks. I appreciate it. As a designer, of course, I appreciate that. But as a watchmaker, I also have to deal with the reality of making watches. And as a designer then, I sometimes have to, I would say cut corners, but I need to accept certain things I would like to not to accept. And it was interesting with Marc because he said, okay, if we cannot do it this way, let's make it differently. Let's do it this way. But the result should be this. And so for me, it was an interesting exercise and very natural, as I said.
So you reached out to him. What was it about Marc's work that made you confident it would be a good fit for collaboration?
We have I think we have a common design culture. He does it a bit differently. He has his own style, of course. but the culture behind it is very similar. It's a culture of good design. It's a culture of minimalizing to the essence of the product. What I also really like about his work is that it's very often organic, and I like that.
You said that he has a different style to yours. How did that materialize in the final watch?
Well, when you look at it, you'll see it's very organic. You can say a Type 3 is a pebble, but the Type 3 we did with Marc is a lot more a pebble.
Right, okay.
It's hard to explain that. What's the difference between a pebble and a pebble? But it's certainly even more a pebble. He also included a dimension that I usually don't do, is the idea of adding the instrument precision, so kind of scientific dimension to it. Like you will see on the watch, there are little lines, and every minute is splitted in X amount of sub things.
Right.
So he added this measurement instrument philosophy more than I would have done it. But it's a Marc Newson design. It's not a Benoît design.
Okay, so there's a new Type 3 coming, which is very exciting. We can't wait to see it. There is also a new Type 1 on the way,
Yes.
which comes in a rose gold
Dial.
form factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you explain what the story is there?
The story, of course, it's a little less deep than a collaboration with Marc Newson, but nevertheless, at Ressence, the dials that we have are usually sandblasted, meaning they have a matte finish. And there's a good reason for that. It's easier to read. But when it comes to the fact we are also in an environment, a luxury environment, very often what you see in fine watches is that they have kind of metallic finish with special lines or special finishes. And here and at Ressence, we only had one watch that had that. That was a blue dial for the Type 1. A little further with this Type 1 gold. So it is rose gold. It's rose gold plated. The dial is rose gold plated. And it has a combination of 3 different finishes on the dial. It has the outer bezel for the minutes is a sandblasted gold. Then you have the dial, and that's a novelty for us. It's absolutely not revolutionary in watchmaking. But for us to have a sunray finish is the first watch we do. It has to do with the fact that the dial of a Ressence, it has openings in it. If you just apply a sunray technique on a Ressence dial, you would not have a sunray because the brushes that create the ray would get stuck in the holes. So we had to develop something different there. And then the sub discs, they also have a wave pattern in section. So it also gives it another refraction or reflection of the light. The whole thing feels very luxurious. The finishes are very beautiful, I believe. So in the end, and then we combine it with light gray to cool it down a bit. And so it's this, it's the whole balance, of course. Product is never one thing. It's always a balance of different things that you do. So in the end, yes, I really like the product. It also feels very, very good on the wrist. I like it.
I mean, I like it too. It's sitting right here for those at home, and it's an extraordinary looking thing. It's quite an achievement. Before we wrap, I'd love to just revisit the unique positioning that Ressence has. Why do you think you've been able to go against the grain so successfully? Where I imagine a lot of similar ventures might fail, but you've been quite successful.
Successful when you're in the ship, it still feels different, I can tell you. There's always challenges when you create and develop a company. But yes, we're 15 years old and we're still growing every year, and the team is growing and collections are evolving. I believe that it's our customers that made that possible. Our customers are not per se people that are attracted to the industry of watchmaking. And what we offer them is a other vision on a product that is a watch, but applied in a very different way. And I believe that the customers that buy a Ressence watch are those people that are attracted to products more than watches. It's thanks to the customers we have that we are here. Otherwise, we would not be here anymore. So yes, swimming against the current feels very good for me. Depends on how you define the current.
Yeah.
But for us, it's the only way we can do it. It's the only way. It's the only natural thing for us. It feels against the current because it's not following the others. But for us, it's our natural path.
Right.
We don't see ourselves going in another one. It would not be natural.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to Man Many.
I thank you for inviting me.
I hope that we get to have this discussion again when you're celebrating the 30th anniversary of Ressence.
We will be here like.
Benoît, thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.